I am Anuli Akanegbu, and you are listening to the Black in Real Life Podcast.
You're golden, you're so golden. What you got, you're the golden child. I see forever between you and me, forever between us.
I have been looking forward to releasing this episode for quite some time. Since I started working on this podcast project over the summer, I knew that I wanted to dedicate an episode to talking about the memeification of Black women and girls. I was inspired in part by the deaths of Breonna Taylor and Oluwatoyin Salau, who became more celebrated in death than they were in life. Unfortunately, the attempts to celebrate the lives of these women became overshadowed by attempts to commodify them as cultural artifacts, as memes. If you search for Breonna Taylor's name on the popular shopping platform Etsy, you will be welcomed to a page of over 6,000 results with ads encouraging you to buy everything from face masks to holiday ornaments with her name or likeness on them. It's safe to say that the proceeds from most of these items will not be going towards supporting her loved ones. Time and time again, it seems that efforts to quote unquote protect Black women can result in neglecting to see the human in them, in us. With this in mind, I knew that I wanted to talk to a scholar about this, and Dr. Aria S. Halliday was the first person I thought about. Dr. Aria S. Halliday is an assistant professor in the Department of Gender and Women's Studies and program in African American and Africana Studies at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Halliday specializes in cultural constructions of Black girlhood and womanhood in material, visual, and digital culture in the 20th and 21st centuries. Her interdisciplinary interests include sexuality, Black feminism, and radicalism in Black popular culture in the United States and the Caribbean. She is the editor of the Black Girlhood Studies collection, published by Women's Press in 2019, and a co-editor of a special issue on hip-hop feminism in the Journal of Hip Hop Studies, which was published earlier this year. Remember, at the end of each interview, I will come back to share a few key takeaways that stood out to me from our conversation. These takeaways will be supplemented with research from both academic and non-academic sources to add further context to subjects that were brought up in the interview portion. For every episode, I will include citations to the reference materials I mentioned, as well as some additional background reading for you on the Black in Real Life website. Visit www.blkirl.com to nerd out. Now, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Dr. Aria S. Halliday. From the murder of Breonna Taylor and the shooting of Megan Thee Stallion, violence against Black women has been the topic of serious online conversation and much less serious memes. How do you think that the adoption of meme and stan language has enhanced public discourse, or how has it also limited our collective conversations around traumatic events or serious issues?
I think that in many instances, a lot of us try to find the best ways to cope, right? And I think that memes and a kind of like memes as a kind of shorthand for the way you might respond to something becomes a stand-in for actual emotional connection or response. And so I think on social media in particular, but I think even more in interpersonal conversations, memes and this kind of like stan culture or whatever, it stands in for like, what you might think more thoroughly about a particular thing because you have a shorthand kind of response. You can pull it up. A lot of people keep, they have a meme folder on their phones. And so it's something quick that you can go to that can stand in for, maybe a more dedicated and more in-depth response to something, right? This kind of image can stand in for how you really think. And I think that in many ways, it has expanded the ways that we communicate with each other, right? A lot of people use memes or GIFs or GIFs or however you want to say it in a way that adds to what they want to say or adds to what they've already talked about. But a lot of people also use it as a way to stand in. And so I think that particularly when we're talking about death and trauma of Black women in particular, right, we are asking people to identify with or, you know, enhance their emotional capacity to understand what it means to be, you know, one of the most marginalized groups in the US, one of the most demonized groups in the US. And that's a lot of work for a lot of people to do. And so they use memes to stand in for, you know, whatever emotional connection they think they should have. And then, you know, the newest ones where they're like, I had a breakfast sandwich this morning, and right after that, I hope we can arrest whatever the correspondence is between whatever they did or whatever the original part of the meme is, and they add this kind of, arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor kind of stuff. And I think that, people think, especially in an image driven culture, that you're swiping or you're scrolling through or whatever, and you're going to see something that's like, oh, that's a cute funny thing, and then you see something that's jarring, right? Like, arrest Breonna Taylor, or however many shots it took to kill blah blah blah, right? Those kinds of ideas, I think, rupture this sense of like endless scrolling, right? Because it's a kind of a emotional attack, right? It stands in for this kind of moment that like shakes you because you're like, oh snap, that's not what I thought this was about at all. And so people have been using it for a kind of shock factor.
What do you think about that argument? Like using it to change up the algorithm or to shock you into paying attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like, memes and just like that's part of their purpose, right? That like the reason why the most popular ones are usually based on something that's racist or horrific, right? Like so, and I mean, I've written about the fact that like usually when you're talking about Black women or something that's traumatic, you use Black women to do that kind of work, and so I mean, on one side of it, I think it's very problematic to use Black women or to use something that's kind of innocuous, like I had breakfast this morning, to like stand in for this kind of really profound conversation that you want people to have. But on the other end, when especially it's quarantine, people are just kind of endlessly scrolling, or what I've seen calling dead scrolling. Like people are just scrolling and they don't even know why. Like something like that could be jarring enough to connect them emotionally to something that they've been kind of numb from or not. But I think that doing it, I can't really speak to the impact or the intent even of what people are or why people are doing things like that. But I think I understand the purpose, even though I may not choose that purpose myself.
Mm. I also think about like not only Breonna Taylor's death, but also the death of Oluwatoyin Salu, who died this year.
Yeah.
And she would have turned 20 on August 27th, which happens to be the day after my 30th birthday. So she comes to mind. We're also both Nigerian. And one thing I noticed was that there are so many like posthumous images that were made to iconicize her after she died on social media. And it was very jarring because you're seeing all this like love being poured into her like after she died, but she needed that support when she was alive. Like she
Right.
has said it. I want to share with you this quote from an article in the Hood Communist, just to get your thoughts on this. And the article is called "On Breonna Oluwatoyin and Posthumous Iconography of Murdered Black People." And in it, it says, "In death, Breonna and Toyin are queens. They are angels, they are saints. They are cover girls and muses. They are regal and chic and beautiful. They are merchandise. They are screensavers. They are profitable." What is striking to you when you hear that?
I mean, two things, right? One, that they are kind of honorific, but they're also profitable, right? That the same ideas of like why we might want to honor and appreciate and respect Black women are the same ideas that might make them profitable, right? That might make somebody put them on the front of a magazine. And I think that what's disturbing, or what I think most people find disturbing about those kinds of things, is that what I saw someone say on Twitter was that like Breonna Taylor would have never been on the cover of a magazine when she was alive, right? And so that it's kind of a strange commodification of her death that she would have never had the opportunity to do in life.
Mm.
Um, And so I think that, when we are specifically talking about commodifying Black death, specifically Black women, we're asking, a system that is created and benefits from our own dehumanization, right? We have been commodities in all the ways that you can be a commodity, that, we are pushing people or trying to remind them that, like, oh, yo, this is a person, this is a human. We need to respect them as a human. But the systems that we are actively working against that kill us, right, if I can be short, are the same systems that have always commodified us. And so I don't think that we should be surprised. Well, not to say that you can't, have an emotional response that's negative to what's happening, but we can't be surprised that, the United States, which is in most Western cultures, which are specifically built on both the labor and the reproductive work that Black women have done for centuries, right? Like, we can't expect them to all of a sudden care that we die when, the whole kind of field of gynecology and J. Marion Sims and, the father of gynecology and all the stuff that they say he is, right, is built off of, ripping apart Black women who were supposed to be getting treatment for pregnancy or stillbirth or whatever, right? Like, the very systems that we have, the fields that we have, the information that we have, if you want to talk about Henrietta Lacks or Tuskegee syphilis study or any of these things, and I'm sure there are many of them that we don't even know the names of, right? Like, everything that we know about the body, about commodities, about selling things, about people, right? All of that comes from the dehumanization of Black women. So I'm not surprised that somebody would put their faces on a magazine and people would buy it, because that's arguably what they tell us our value is, right? Your value is only, right, to be used in this way.
And I think that's a good point that you make, that essentially all of these structures are made off the backs of Black women. So many industries are made off the backs of Black women. So now I'm thinking, as a Black woman, both of us, like, how do we take that awareness and move about in the world?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I tell people, and I've written about this too, when I grew up in, the early 90s, my mom never told us, like, we never sat down and have a conversation about the cops. We never sat down and have a conversation about, like, what it means to be a Black woman and to, like, walk around with keys or only park under light structures, so like, if somebody's trying to mess with you or whatever. Like, we didn't have those conversations. It was understood. It's in the water, right? Like, part of just who you are. You get, like, my hair means something, my body means something, I'm always available to certain people, but, like, that's part of the way that Black girls especially grow up. And I think that, what keeps us sane, I think, is that, knowing, one, we're not alone, right? Like, there are other Black women who are also experiencing this, but, like, this information is not new. And so, part of why I'm a professor in the first place is because, I found joy and sorrow and trauma and love in the stories of other Black women, right? Like, Black women who've come before me and studied and thought about what it means to be a Black woman, what it means to exist with these structures that's not going anywhere, right? Like, what it means to deal with these things people have written about for ages, right? Like, Audre Lorde has been talking about this stuff, right? When she was alive and when she passed, right? There are people from, the continent, for example. There are people from Europe, there are people from the US, from Canada, from South America, who have been talking about these different things. And I think, what grounds me, I think, every day is that, like, there's somebody else to turn to. Like, even when it feels like it's the craziest, most ridiculous situation that I have been in, right? Someone else has written about this. Someone else has theorized this. Someone else has really, like, plotted through and thought about how ridiculous it is that we still have to deal with this, but also how we continue to move on from it. And I think, like, that's what I get energized by. That's why I continue to wake up every day and decide, like, okay, being a Black woman is the best thing that there is in the world, even as, right, people have all this stuff to say.
It was a particularly great moment to be a Black woman this weekend when Girlfriends was released on Netflix. I don't know if you had a chance to catch up. I personally had caught up on the whole series last year. My friend gifted me the box set for my birthday, so I've already been rewatching it. I wanted to get your thoughts about it, because you do work in the realm of, like, media representation of, like, Black womanhood and Black girlhoods. And I think this is a great example to talk through a show like Girlfriends. How do you think Girlfriends contributes to the representation of Black women's lives on screen? And why do you think it still resonates with people now, 20 years since it first premiered?
Right. I think that's a great question. One, I've been watching Moesha, so
Oh, let's talk about Moesha too.
I
Your
haven't gotten to
thoughts?
Girlfriends yet. It's on the list because they're releasing all of them in this month. So I've been trying to catch up on Moesha and deal with whatever is happening in that show. But I think Moesha, Girlfriends, Sister Sister, a lot of these like 90s shows, early 2000 shows that they're re-releasing, I think one pushes us to engage, who we were at the time, right? Like when Moesha is, premiering 1996, 1997, like I was 6, right? So there are certain ways to like think about like what am I seeing and viewing, what ideas are being put out for Black girls, for Black women at the time, but also I think they continue to resonate because we still have those same conversations, we still have those same questions. A show like Girlfriends, which is like, not too different than something like Insecure, right? The kind of, or even if you want to go back further, Living Single, right? It's a very kind of resonant idea that you have Black girlfriends who are trying to go through life together and navigate what those relationships require of them. And so I think that, Girlfriends is going to continue to resonate. Living Single is going to continue to resonate. Moesha and other shows will continue to resonate in the way that Insecure and other shows do, because, those same conversations about, dating outside your race, or what does it mean to deal with Black men? What kind of job do I want? Where do I want to live? But, how do I want to wear my hair? All those kind of conversations that happen across those shows, happen in real life, happen in conversations that you have with your mother or your girlfriends or whoever. And so they continue to resonate because you're like, maybe I could have dealt with that conversation differently. Or if I was presented with this option, how would I have maybe manifested that differently? Like I think about Living Single and Khadijah's character with Scooter, how they were going back and forth for ages, right? Like I know chicks who are Khadijah, right? Trying to like live their own life, but also they have this dude, or they're like, do I continue to try to deal with this? Do I stop? Do I not? Right? And I think that they resonate because they're stories that we continue to identify with. But I think also, thinking through a 2020 lens, we can see all of the ways that they were problematic. And, someone was saying recently to me that like they watched Moesha, and those first couple of episodes, probably the first 3 or 4, have like all of these kind of fat phobic
I've heard that argument,
jokes about Kim and Kim's character, and like why somebody would want her or why they wouldn't want her. But I think that like, in 2020 we can say, oh, that's so rude that somebody would say that, but like as a chunky Black girl in 1996, people definitely said those things, right? And so I think that like, it's a window into who we were at the time as a country, as a community, as a kind of Black diasporic thought conversation, and how we've changed, right? I think that, and there are a lot of ways that we're the same, and that, there's a lot of attention to like heterosexuality and all these kinds of things, and like what Black men want, and gangster culture and cars and all of that. But there's a lot of stuff that's different that like Insecure, hopefully, right, tries to pick up and do something differently with. And so I think if you compare those, right, shows and kind of think through them over time, and like where we are as a community, and I mean community in the broad sense, not like the Black community, right, but where we are as a community and how we grow intellectually, like, there's some huge changes between who we were in 1995 and 2020. And I think that is huge when we talk about, really understanding what it means, Blackness is not a monolith, and how representation has to be expansive. Like, I was just watching Lovecraft Country, right? And so what it means for a particular, Black man character like Montrose to be queer, and all the ways we might put queer in quotes, right? In 2020, I'm not sure that we would have been watching or even interested in that in 1990, right? Even if there are people who we know who live and experience life that way, that doesn't necessarily mean it would have been on television, like not in the way that Moesha or Sister Sister or something like that was. And so I think that, to me, it just speaks about like how different life is now, how much more expansive, how much more growth, right, we've been through in terms of, what we appreciate on television, the stories that we love, the stories that we identify with, but also how much further we have to go, right? I hope in 2020, we're having particular conversations about trans women and the murder of Black women and children and that kind of thing. But, hopefully in 2040, we're talking about something else, right? Hopefully. That's not, I can say hopefully that's happening.
I want to pull apart a few pieces from your commentary there. First, the very serious question of because you said, some women who are Khadijas. Which living single character would you describe yourself as?
Oh, that's dangerous. I don't know. I always identified very closely with Maxine Shaw, right?
Attorney at law.
Oh yeah. But I think in real life I'm probably a mix of Khadijah and Maxine, only in that, I think I'm much more connected to and interested in a kind of communal sense that I think Khadijah was always attuned to. She was always thinking about like, what are we doing together, or how do I help somebody, or whatever. I also, love having multiple romantic relationships at one time, which Khadijah was very good at.
She always had a fine man on her.
Right. I mean, and Max too. They always were busy. I will put it like that. They were always busy with multiple friends, which I loved. But like Max was always invested in like eating well and having a good laugh, and I love that. So I would definitely say I'm probably a mix of those two. And I mean, I'm kind of an intense person. Max could have been intense, so I identify with that.
And you said you've been watching Moesha, and I'm wondering, because you also mentioned some of the commentary that people have been making since rewatching it. How has it been to rewatch Moesha for you now as an adult?
Well, I think it's hard because I'm watching, kind of through childhood nostalgia, right? Of like remembering it and Brandy, but also I study, what it means to see Black girls on screen. So I'm watching it through kind of two lenses. One, what it means to like experience it in myself, but also what it means to watch these kinds of things in 2020 or in 1996. And I think that what is dope, the show is so cute. Like I think that I can immediately connect it with, I remembered the song, the theme song, and, the kind of family dynamic they've created, and Kim wanted to be a cheerleader. I never wanted to be a cheerleader, but I had a friend who tried to force me to try out for basketball, and that was a problem. But I was there for her, right? Like, so there are so many stories that like I remember that made up, middle school and high school that so much represented some of what the show talks about. So I enjoy it for that reason, right? But the other part of me is like, I think, so often people want to read things in their evolved brain, right? Like everybody's woke now. So they're watching the show through this kind of, oh, well, it should have done this. And it's like, okay, well, in 1996, nobody was talking about that in the same ways, right? So you can't expect a show that's on, WB or UPN or whatever it was to really do something that, we're only really seeing on like HBO now. And the only reason we can see it on HBO is people can, stream it. Back in the day, you can pay for HBO. That was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, because you just mentioned like when you watch shows, you're not just doing it as like a regular, consumer or viewer, you're also a scholar. Right. And as someone who like studies popular culture and also like consumes in their personal time, do you feel overwhelmed with like everything you watch? You're like, oh, I could write a paper about that. Like, oh, there's something, like, do you ever actually just get to watch without critical lens, or is the critical lens still important to you when you view things?
The critical lens is always there. And I think that, to be honest, it was always there before I got a degree, right? That some of what you get, and I tell my students this all the time, because they're like, oh my God, you ruined this show for me. Now I can never watch it because I see all the things that you're talking about. And I'm like, okay, but you should see those things, right? The reason that we don't see them is because we live in a system that tells us it's important to ignore it, right? But then you learn, through proximity to people, through other experiences, through school, you get language, right, to really understand and interpret what's happening. And so I would say that it's always been there. I just have better language, and I'm a kind of more adept to like understand what's happening in the context of it. There are, of course, things that I'm able to watch with perhaps less critically. I don't know if it's, not at all, but it's maybe less so. But usually I'm watching something like Project Power, for example, the film with Jamie Foxx that's on Netflix right now. And, I'm not thinking anything that's necessarily academic. I'm like, okay, we about to watch an action show. Some people are going to get shot and killed, like whatever. And then there's this scene with a Black girl that I'm like, oh no, what are they doing to the Black girl? What's happening? And all of a sudden it's something that I need to think through, right? And so I think that sometimes I have this kind of like jarring kind of critical moment where I'm not necessarily trying to like engage in a super critical way, but there's an undercurrent of something, there's something misogynist that happens, there's something that's racist that happens, and I'm like, hold on, did they just say what I thought they just said? Hold on, wait a second, rewind. We need to replay this. And I think that definitely shifts the way that I understand what's being read or what's happening on screen. Yeah.
I want to now pivot our conversation to a presentation that you did last year called The Afro Features of Feminism, Young, Gifted, and Black. I watched it, and it was during an open forum at Plymouth State University.
Yeah.
And I want to first ask you, like, the most basic questions just from the title, because I hear the word Afrofuturism a lot, and maybe some listeners may not even know what that is, but they hear it too. What does it mean to be an Afrofuturist? What is Afrofuturism?
That's a great question. So Afrofuturism comes out of a particular kind of fantasy science fiction kind of conversation. So there are people like Octavia Butler who get thrown in a lot in terms of conversations about Afrofuturism. There's music. Sorry, my brain is like trying to add all the people together. I'm like, how do I give you the shorthand? But basically it's thinking about, what are the other possibilities, otherworldly or not, right, for Black people. And I think that, or through the eyes of a Black person. I shouldn't say that it's always about Black people, but I think Afrofuturism, if you use Octavia Butler, for example, she's always thinking about, the next world, or, vampires, or fantasy, or science, or technology, right? It has this kind of idea about what it means for Black people to experience the world differently, right? So thinking about futures, it's not necessarily about post 2020, but it's about thinking beyond the present moment, specifically for Black folk. That would be my shorthand.
Nice. And I want to pull up one thing you said in that presentation. You said a lot of times we think of the future as something separate from ourselves, but the future is happening now. And the future is what we hope to embrace is the work that we do today. You said this last year. What does that mean to you today?
This is why I never go back to listen to anything I said. I'm like, oh, I said that? I'm smart. Okay, so I think what I meant at the time was that, I think a lot of times when we're talking about racial justice, or how do we experience the world differently or better, right? We think it always has to be like future, right? It has to be in some time where I'm, more established, or I'm more an adult, I have more money, I have more whatever. And I think particularly when I was talking, those are in the context of college students, but when you're talking to people in a present moment, they have to understand that, like, and this is Angela Davis. It's not even, Aria Halliday being special or spooky deep or anything, but like Angela Davis would say, like, it takes this particular moment right now where you decide to do something differently than what you've done before, right? And I think that for folks in May of this year, for example, who are like, I maybe have never marched before, but today I'm going to march because I want a different result than what we have, right? That is one, kind of one individual choice that makes a lasting impression, not only on the other people that you're interacting with, but on the world. And so I think that, when we're talking about like futures or futurism and what that might mean, it means that like you are creating the future right now, and the choices that you make, and the people that you interact with, the food that you eat, right? You're creating, your tomorrow by what you do today. You're creating next week, you're creating next month, next year, by what you do right now. And I think that, like I said, that's not like a special tenet of something that I said, but I think that's really the way that the Black women radicals that I love and appreciate, the Black women progressives that I follow, right? That's the kind of work that they're committed to, right? Like, it may not make sense right now because you're trying to figure out how to even do it, but in a year from now, the system's going to be created, it's going to be set up, it's going to be smooth, but you got to start somewhere.
What can we, the collective we in this case, do to promote Black feminist scholarship and these scholars that you talk of and this work that they do?
I think, as a professor, people will be so mad at this answer, but I'm like, first of all, you need to read. I think so many folks expect like a Spark Notes kind of response to racial justice, to Blackness, to like understanding what's going on in the world. You want something that's quick and easy that you can, digest in, 2 minutes or something like that. And that's just not, that's not how the way that the world works, but also that's not the way that like changing who you are and the world that you live in is going to work. at all, right? Like,
Mm.
so I think that, I mean, if you want to know more about, Afrofuturism, go pick up, Yatasha Womack's Black, a book about Afrofuturism, or you could pick up Angela Davis, or you could pick up Audre Lorde or Octavia Butler that I already named, or there's so many, even in a present sense, right? There are books coming out almost every day by Black
Mm-hmm.
women writers that will give you some of that understanding of Afrofuturism, but also of Black feminist scholarship. So, Mickey Kendall has a book called Hood Feminism that came out
Yeah.
recently. Brittany Cooper's Eloquent Rage does a great job. Tracy McMillan Cotton has Thick that came out. I mean, there's so much, right? I mean, go
Yeah.
to a shelf and just buy the whole
Read a book.
shelf. Just buy the whole shelf and you'll
Yeah.
be good. But I think also, so I don't mean just buy the books. Yes, buy them, but also read them,
Yes.
because there are people out here buying books that never read them. So,
For the,
including
the
myself.
shelfies.
Right, yeah. No, I mean, including myself. I'm not going to, I got books on my shelf I need to read. But, so I would say, one, you need to read. Two, I think, get in a group with other people who are trying to have these same conversations, right? So there are a lot of people, especially right now, who are connecting via Zoom and other means to, have book clubs, right? My best friend and I started a book club for like how to build your friendship better, right? Like, so I think there's multiple groups that you can join in, and literally I think it's called book clubs with a Z.com. You can create your own book club, tell people when to meet, when y'all gonna talk, and really have a conversation about what you're reading, so that it's not just you processing on your own, which can be great, but you're processing in community, which I think is what's required, right, to really change the way that we understand ourselves and the world around us. So read, talk to some other folk, and then I would say support organizations, right?
Mm.
So there are a lot of organizations, Black feminists and otherwise, who are doing really great work on the ground, whether that's Movement for Black Lives or that's something else, right? There are a lot of mutual aid organizations you can support in your local community, even if it's, $3 a month or $5 a month or $10 a month, right? Right now I'm a subscriber for Bitch Media, which is, one of the only, still surviving independent
Mm-hmm.
feminist media organizations, and they do a quarterly magazine, and it's $8 a month. I'm not even doing nothing crazy, right? But I think that committing to a particular group of organizations, let's say like I'm doing something for the alumni organization from the universities that I attended, I'm doing something for Bitch Media, I'm doing something, right? So there are multiple ways that you might contribute, time, energy, money, and passion. But I think that so many people are like, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm not going to do anything. I think doing those three things, right? Like reading, talking in conversation with other people, and then supporting organizations, whether that's time or money or whatever, like those three things will change the world instantaneously.
And I also want to ask in that lens, who should people follow that you think is like doing a good job at just being Black, just being a woman in the world? Like, who do you recommend?
Who are the people who are doing great just being Black? I have a friend from graduate school, Chelsea Frazier, and I think she has a page called Ask an Amazon on Twitter and Instagram, that she does work around Black feminist scholarship about environmentalism. So if you have questions about like why California is on fire right now, like check out Chelsea and her work and really understand like what the context is and what that has to do with racism, with white supremacy, with feminism, right? All these things are related. And I think she does a really great job of, being unapologetically Black herself, right? But also like, pushing people to engage not only their experiences, but how they connect to all the other ones. She's really fabulous. I mean, I think it's ridiculous to say follow me because I don't think I'm doing anything that particularly great, but
You better big up yourself. You're existing as a Black feminist scholar
I'm
in
out
academia.
Here. I'm out here. But the only reason I would say follow me is because I spend most of my time on Twitter promoting other people, right? Like I spent like most of my tweets are about jobs, are about opportunities, are about organizations.
And what's your handle for the people?
At Dr. Aria Halliday. Yeah, I mean, most of the work that I do is promoting other people. I mean, sometimes I'm out here doing crazy stuff where, I'm creating debates on social media, which is a bad idea. But I think most of the time it's about, I'm interested in us getting this money, right? I'm promoting jobs, I'm promoting opportunities, I'm promoting, organizations to support, I'm promoting, books to buy, right? I mean, almost every day I'm like, go buy this book. It's dope. So I think like if you want to do those 3 things that I mentioned, you know, in the last question, like, you know, you can follow me and find those people, and you can decide after you find those people, you don't need to follow me anymore. And that's totally fine, you know, because I believe in my heart of hearts, like I'm a connector. It's not about me. It's about how do I get you to the next thing that's going to help you. And so, you know, follow me for 30 days to see if you get what you need. And if you do, great. And if you don't, great. Like, you know, there are multiple ways to get there. But I think Twitter in particular has a feature where you can just like look up specific phrases, like look up those phrases and see who's talking about Afrofuturism on Twitter, and follow people who are doing that work. Follow authors who are doing, you know, the reading of the stuff that you're reading or whatever. Like there are people who are doing really dope stuff, but I think sometimes when you don't know where to start, you're confused, but like start from what you know, but then, you know, where you want to expand. If I want to know more about environmental racism, let me see who's writing about that. If I want to know more about, you know, in college, I was really interested in mountain removal. I didn't even know that was a thing, right? There are literally people who are blowing up pieces of mountains and moving them, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
In Appalachia, right? It's a whole thing, and it literally destroys communities, destroys lungs. I mean, it kills kids. It's all kinds of crazy stuff, right? But they're trying to get coal, so they blow up part of the mountain, right? And I watched a documentary about it, and so I follow people who write about that because I want to know what's happening with mountain removal in Appalachia. You know, any of those things. I'm interested in what's happening on Native reservations. So I follow a couple of, you know, activists who are doing stuff on Native Americans. I'm interested in what's happening in Hawaii and, you know, indigenous communities. So I follow some of those. I'm interested in what's happening with K-pop in Korea. So I'm following people who are doing that. I think, like, you know, you're never going to get everything, but I think it's important to think expansively about, you know, where do you get your information from? And, you know, Twitter is a great place to kind of like collate all those things into one place. Put all those things in one place and say, okay, I kind of have a handle on this thing. Let me go follow 3 other people who are doing it.
That was my interview with Dr. Aria S. Halliday. While Dr. Halliday and I covered a lot of topics in our conversation, I would like to focus today's takeaways on highlighting Dr. Halliday's research. Not only do I find her work to be so necessary to read, but I also believe it is important to support Black women by citing Black women. Shout out to Kristen A. Smith and the hashtag #CiteBlackWomen movement. In 2018, Dr. Halliday published a paper for the Girlhood Studies interdisciplinary journal called Miley, What's Good? Nicki Minaj's Anaconda, Instagram Reproductions, and Viral Mimetic Violence. In this paper, she writes about how the bodies, aesthetics, and experiences of Black women are vilified for viral enjoyment by using the creation of memes that appropriated the artwork from Nicki Minaj's single Anaconda as evidence to support her claim. Dr. Halliday introduces the term image economy to describe the ways that global conversations and attitudes towards popular ideas are fueled by the constant sharing of images digitally on social media sites. She goes on to apply this term to the process of viral reification as it relates to Black girls and women. Viral reification is a 2-part phenomenon that involves the intertwined processes of commodification and objectification. Commodification in this context is when demonizing ideas and concepts about Black girls and women are recycled in digital spaces. Objectification in this context is when Black girls and women are denied humanity in these recycled racist and misogynist images. Through this viral reification process, Black girls and women are made into objects that are then sold. While Dr. Halliday goes on to examine the digital beheading of Nicki Minaj's Anaconda single art and Miley Cyrus's role in it to demonstrate how the bodies of Black girls and women are subject to symbolic deaths on digital platforms, she also discusses how digital representations of Black women directly influence the ways that they are treated beyond social media. Here, she cites the experiences of women like Charnesia Corley, Wanisha McBride, Sandra Bland, and Nia Wilson. Say her name. Charnesia Corley, Wanisha McBride, Sandra Bland, Nia Wilson. Black women who were subjected to violence for simply existing. Quite literal deaths. This article was written before the murders of Breonna Taylor and Oluwatoyin Salau, and many other women, cis and trans women collectively, who have been subjected to violence for simply existing. But the issues overall since this piece was published that Dr. Halliday highlights, they remain pressing, they remain relevant. I want to turn now to talk a bit about one of Dr. Halliday's most recent projects, a special issue of the Journal of Hip Hop Studies released in July 2020 that highlights the particular oppressions faced by Black women who are hip-hop feminists and the ways that they thrive in spite of it. In this issue that Dr. Halliday co-edited with Dr. Ashley Ann Payne of Missouri State University, the editors lay out what they called the 21st Century BITCH frameworks. These frameworks were created to provide a more nuanced definition of hip-hop feminism that opens a conversation of hip-hop feminism to all women, from the ratchet woman to the classy woman to the hood feminist, and to all women, femmes, and girls who, as they write in their introduction, continuously represent and reconstruct Black girl/womanhood. The issue traces the genealogy of the scholarship on hip-hop feminism and its relationship with second-wave Black feminism, while positioning hip-hop feminism as a liberatory framework and epistemology that rests at the center of conversations surrounding sexual pleasure and identity. As a scholar, Dr. Halliday produces work that centers and celebrates Black girls and women, while also challenges the various racist and misogynist stereotypes that result in their oppression both online and offline. You have just listened to a production of the Black in Real Life podcast, hosted by Anuli Akanegbu, developed by Anuli Akanegbu, scripted by Anuli Akanegbu, edited by Anuli Akanegbu, with research support by Anuli Akanegbu. The music was graciously provided by Garth, whose single Wild can be streamed on anywhere you can find music. Thank you, and remember, the people you follow online are also Black in real life.